this latest phase of grief. I don't really like the word phase, but I say phase. And I think phase because they felt like phases because they were so quick before, not as in quick like I got over them quickly, but as in quick because I didn't have much, and nor did my family, of time or any kind of time to kind of deal with the one we just had, 'cause there's another one. So, as you probably would have guessed by now, it wasn't long before grief came along again. Oh, yes, indeed. So, I was still in my early teens by this point. So, I'd obviously, as you've read before in my other chapters, I'd been through the death of Barbara and kind of was dealing with that, and then was supporting my friend through the death of his father. And I'd put that grief on hold for Barbara, and then after the death of my friend's father, I'd come back to the grief with Barbara. So I was still in that, still very much in that. And then there was this phase where it felt like there was quite a few periods of grief that my family kind of went through. So after my friend's father's funeral, I think we had a sort of a 6-month reprieve, and then one of the members from the group passed away. Now, as I said before, this group consisted of various individuals with various different needs, various different life limiting conditions, and lots of different backgrounds. The individual that died in the group, the 6 months after my friend's father, was someone who lived to be of a good age, and just died of old age, which was my first experience of somebody just dying of old age, and kind of like naturally, in the way I suppose it should be, that they'd had this long life. And that felt foreign to me. That felt really strange because I'd not had that before. I'd not had that. They'd had a long life and they died peacefully. Because to me, death at this point didn't feel like it would be peaceful and okay. Because even though Barbara, I was told it was peaceful, she was in hospital, she wasn't in any pain, I suppose is a way of my brain dealing with that trauma of losing her and trying to make sense, or doing it in a really bizarre way. It didn't believe that. And I kind of had these images for a very long time of her in that hospital bed and not in pain, and kind of it being very drawn out and very long. So to be grieving for somebody who had that peaceful, had a long life narrative felt really alien. And again, during the funeral, I had the same reaction of, when I see the coffin, I see Barbara's. But then after I see Barbara's, I see my friend's father's one. Then I see the person's funeral I'm at. So we were on funeral 3 now. So again, I parked Barbara because I felt like it wasn't about her now. It was about this person from the disabilities group, and I needed to be there for my mum and dad. Even though I was still young, I just felt this sense I needed to be. I needed to support them. And I suppose there's a bit of a reflection here as well. I was then made very aware, more so than I was before, that maybe actually there was a lot more to come. It was like this epiphany moment of, and actually what I associate it with is, and this is going to be of the time I write this book, TV show called Wednesday, which is fantastic. And in the TV show, the character Wednesday gets these premonitions, and she kind of like touches something or someone or whatever, and she kind of like takes a deep breath, and her head goes back and her eyes go wide, and the character kind of jolts a bit, and she has these premonitions. It kind of felt like as I touched that pew when I was that young self, that teenager, I had this moment of because I suddenly realized that actually this is going to happen a lot more. And I kind of felt like this wasn't going to be okay, well, we're not going to have this for a long time. This is like this is, yes, of course, natural, and people do leave us, but I'm not going to have to, and my family aren't going to have this for a while. And it kind of started to hit me that wasn't true. Because what I realised was, with this disabilities group, there were a lot of people there with life-limiting conditions. And even though I talked about it before in my other chapter, and about being made aware of that as I was growing up and knowing about that, I didn't quite believe it in a way. Or not that I didn't believe it, it didn't hit me. I don't know what the wording is, but it just didn't register because I was, a child, and I suppose I still was at this time because it's early teens. I kind of just, oh yeah, okay, and just then carried on with whatever I was doing. Because when you're a child, you kind of are in your own world. You get told a lot of stuff, but you're kind of like, yeah, okay. And that was the sense for this. But in that moment, it was like, oh, actually, no. This is true. There are a lot of people who I'm going to have to say goodbye to. And what it then meant was, I was very aware that people would be taken, and it could be that I don't know when. So I would often think about what I would do if X person went. What would their funeral look like? How would I cope? What would I do? Would I say something? And even though I was an early teen, these feelings, these thoughts were really strong and carried with me for a long, long time. And they're still there even now as I write this. And again, we went to the wake, and I had the same sort of feeling about the wake. And I was still having this moment of, oh my gosh. And that made it really hard. But what I also had the moment of, and the whole Wednesday feeling of, lightning bolt of, oh my gosh, my mum and dad. They started this group way before me and my brother were around. They would have had to do this a lot already. And I felt like I needed to then almost be there for them more. And that's another thing that grief kind of does, and a reflection that we need to have in ourselves, that grief can do this thing of, I need to be there for this person. I need to be strong for this person. I need to be strong for my mum, dad, brother, friend, uncle, auntie, whoever it might be, partner, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it might be, whoever it might be. I need to be there for them. So that strong sense was really powerful for me. And it's a reflection at this point in the book to go, and yes, we're early on in the book and there'll be a lot more reflections to come, but to kind of, if you're reading this as well, give yourself that grace of, yes, of course, we don't want to become so selfish in our grief that we're not there for anybody, because that is too far the other way. But we equally don't want to be there for people so much and try and support them to the nth degree that we're leaving ourselves behind. Because when you have a big support network around you, which is incredible when you do, or even if you don't and you just have a few people, it doesn't matter. If you do the whole, I need to be there for them, and that's it, you actually do damage to yourself in the long run far more. And it's okay to sometimes be like, actually, I can be there for you and I will be there for you and I'm trying to be strong for you. But this point in time, I just can't be, because this grief I'm feeling, this losing this person, is so painful. I need to work through that first. Or it could be today, for whatever reason, I can't quite support you as well as I could because I need to just journal what I'm going through. I need to just cry what I'm going through. I need to express somehow, some way, what I'm going through without harming me or anyone else. And then I can be there for you. And it's okay to do that. Because grief brings out a very vulnerable side of each and every one of us. It's a real place where we are suddenly feeling like we are exposed to the world. And that in itself can be really, really hard. So you need to take care of yourself. But at that age, when I was those early teens, that whole thought process, that whole reflection, of course it wasn't there. It wasn't there in my mind. It was never there. It wasn't a thing. So I kind of was like, right. So when grief happens, I'm feeling this grief now, and it's probably going to happen again. I need to make sure I'm there for people. I need to make sure it's okay. So I kind of started to become this little, like, feeling like I had to be this little container. Like I had to be this little container. I had to kind of like just make sure everyone was okay. And if I was doing that, then that meant everything was fine. So that's how it started to be from that young age. So after this person's funeral from the group, I went back to Barbara again. But kind of this time, I was really conscious more and more about my mum, because I love my mum. My mum is an incredibly strong woman who has had to deal with grief a lot before I was around my brother, but also after that. And I was very aware that she was having to deal with and try and understand and go through the process of grieving her very close friend. And I tried to, I don't know, just help as much as I could in my own way. And I don't know how I did that, but I just felt, and maybe it looked like I wasn't, but in my head, that's what I was trying to do. And I remember then gearing up for, at the same time, the next person. So I was kind of going in my head, right, who's going to be next? And that started from early teen. I was like, right, breathe, but be on the lookout. It was kind of like, is it a hare? Is it the hares that, or is it, no, meerkat. Meerkat. It was like a meerkat when they stand on that mound and they're kind of like looking, their heads going from side to side, their ears are pricked up, their little hands are like down by their, their chest, and they're cute meerkats, but they're scanning, they're looking, and they're kind of on the lookout, and they're just checking for this danger. And that's what I felt like I was doing from that early teens, like, okay, and kind of really trying to make the most of every encounter, every sort of thing that happened and that was around me, and every interaction and every celebration, whatever it might be, really intently, like a meerkat, because I was scared that if I didn't, I would then regret when someone else died, because I was like, well, this person might die next. So that was kind of my my thought process, and my headspace, and that didn't go. That stayed with me all the years down the line. It still is a little bit now. It's got better. And even though I said before in another chapter, and I realize I've said, living the best life, I can't stand it, all that stuff, and not having to take every moment. And it's true. That is very strong within me, that I really can't stand that phrase. But subconsciously, without thinking about it, I do that. I'm on heightened mode, because in every interaction, I'm like, right, I've got to make this last. And that's what grief can do to you as well. It can make you more heightened. Now, my friends know, and those who read this that are my friends, if they are reading it, will laugh if they're reading this when I say I am somebody who's very reflective. And I will often, at the end of a night, we used to go on nights out, write some kind of reflective, mushy Facebook post. I will text them a mushy thing of how much I love them and grateful for them. I will write about it. I will do all this stuff, because I'm again on that heightened, I don't want, and again, I will, when we're on nights out, when I'm away somewhere, I will constantly be looking at the watch, because I'm like, I don't want this to end. Equally, of course, because I'm having fun, like anyone does. Oh, we're having fun, don't want it to end. But equally, I'm like that meerkat again, because I'm like, because what about if I get a call the next day and this person's died or this person's gone? So I would kind of be like, if I don't take all this in now, I'm going to regret it. And that is what my meerkat brain does. Now, as I've said before, through a lot of therapy and through maturing and through understanding, that meerkat brain's lessened a bit, but it's still there and it's still quite strong. And it kind of is activated a lot after grief. After any form of grief now, that meerkat brain is like up there, and it's like scan, scan, scan. And I have to be really subconscious of that. So back to being this early teen, this meerkat brain was on. And I was very, very aware that somebody else was going to go. And I was also kind of grieving something else in a way, I suppose. I was coming to terms with who I was. I knew for a long time about my sexuality, but I was starting to understand it more and more and more, because in secondary school, you start to notice people around you more. I start to notice the my peers around me and my male peers, and kind of seeing them in different light. So in a way, I was in a bit of a grief mode with that, because I was like, what about if so and so doesn't love me anymore? What about if my family reject me? So I was kind of preparing for another set of grief in terms of that. So there's a lot of complications going on at this point. It was a very messy time. And obviously, for anybody, teenage years are messy, because our brain, anyway, this is, scientifically shown and proven, our brain goes through a complete rebuild during our teenage years anyway. It goes completely back, it gets stripped back, and it rebuilds itself. And that in itself is messy anyway. So I was a little bit all over the place. So even though I was meerkat mode, getting ready, knowing, I was still completely oblivious to what was to come. And oblivious to how that meerkat would be joined by like 10 other meerkats, because I needed more to help me, because there's going to be more people that might go. So meerkat mode was activated 100%.